Welcome to today's show. I think you're going to find today's show absolutely fascinating. If you haven't heard of today's guest before, Eric Edmeades, you are in for a treat. I don't know how it's going to go, to be quite honest, because we are two peas from the same pod. We've both come at the solution to health from pretty much the same way of traveling around the world, spending time with remote tribes, and both come at it because we're both unhealthy in our younger years. Neither of us doctors, both fascinated by evolution. Anyway, but before we get there, welcome to the show. My name's Steve Bennett, your host. We're here to do two or three things. First, to educate everybody during lockdown about what good health looks like, and trying to get, if you're maybe a bit overweight, maybe you're pre-diabetic or diabetic, to try and help you get your health in order. Secondly, we're here to raise money for the food banks across the UK. At the moment, during lockdown, they need more help than they've ever needed before, because we've got, obviously, with the financial crisis, we've got more people that are relying on donations to put food on their table for themselves and for their children. So anything you could do to help would be fantastic. Either go to Just Giving or, of course, donate via the text number. And also, we're trying to look at the positives. What might life look like coming out the other side of lockdown? Maybe there'll be less global warming. Maybe we'll have changed the food that we eat for good. There has to be some positives to come out of this very difficult situation at the moment. But let's dive straight into today's chat about changing your relationship with food. I've got to tell you right now, Eric is in New York. If you're watching it live, you know what time it is. If it's a record, if you're watching a repeat or a catch-up, then it could be any time of the day. It is not even 5 o'clock in the morning in New York, or it's just turning 5 o'clock. So Eric, first of all, thank you for getting up so early to speak with us.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm actually not in New York. I'm in the Dominican Republic on New York time.
Oh, okay. Well, I got that one completely wrong. Of course, that's where you live and you kite surf and all those amazing sports that you do.
Yeah, it's a gorgeous place to be, and it's a hell of a nice place to spend lockdown, I have to confess.
Well, I tell you one thing for definite where we are, because we're so similar, two peas from the same pod. Where we're different is you can kite surf. My son and I, we've had so many lessons trying to learn to kite surf, and we are rubbish at it. So you're definitely one of us there. So let's dive straight in. Tell us a little bit about your story, your history, and then we'll get the debate going.
Yeah, sure. Well, back in about 1991, I had a big sort of health renaissance. I'd been sick for a very long time. Some friends of mine kind of got talking to me about food. I thought, well, I'm fairly healthy. I don't know. But wow, I changed my my relationship with food. And 30 days later, I'd lost 35 pounds. All the symptoms I'd been suffering with for 10 years were gone. I no longer needed to see the doctors, but I did become curious about my relationship with them, many of them being in my own family. And one of the things that I stumbled upon is that doctors have been incredibly useful in my life when I'd had things like trauma. When I was 18, somebody lit me on fire. I definitely needed skin grafts, and a doctor needed to be there for me, thankfully. But when it came to preventative, it really wasn't the place to go. And I kind of wanted to get into solving that issue for myself. And I was very lucky. I'm a very curious guy. And so here I was, incredibly curious about what was going on around medical education and food. And totally separately, I'm originally from South Africa. My great-grandfather was a zoologist, archaeologist who had discovered at the time the oldest Homo sapiens skull in history. And so I also was really fascinated by early human history and evolution. And those things combined to really put me on the right track where, basically I had a realization one day that we use the word diet correctly with every other species in the world, and we use it incorrectly for us. If you're watching a nature program, they talk about the elephant's diet. They talk about the leafcutter ant's diet, and that what they mean is their lifestyle. And it's only us that goes on a diet. And that's what really sent me down the path of, wait a second, if every species on Earth has a diet, then surely we do too. And then that's where I started heading into my research.
That's a great place to start. I totally agree. Now, the word diet comes from a Greek word, which is dietus, which means way of life. And for every other species, whenever we say it, that's what we mean. But for us, it seems to be something that has changed ever since the production of the first diet products, or the fad things that we were to try, or the weight watching programs, or diet seems to be something short term, isn't it? When really it means something for life.
It really does. You know, and it's funny, when I first started speaking about this, I registered thehumandiet.com, and I'm like, it's all going to be about the human diet. And my very first talks, funny enough, that I ever did on this were all over the UK. I was living in Bristol at the time, and I traveled all around the UK doing this like lecture circuit on the human diet in the late 90s. And it just was a beautiful place to start the conversation. And here's why: because when I landed in the UK in 97, I would suggest that the average British person was a lot healthier fundamentally than they were in the United States. And overall, over the next 10 years that I lived in the UK, I watched the population grow. And I don't mean the number of people. I mean, I watched the people around me as American food regulations and American food distribution and food restaurants started coming into the UK. I watched the population around me growing, and it was really disconcerting. It happened slower in America because, you know, fast food started, but it hit the UK quick and hard right at that point in time. Yeah, and that's what got me thinking about the next aspect was, sure, I had figured out some things about, you know, call it nutritional anthropology. What humans need to be eating isn't a mystery. It's the science is solved on that as far as I'm concerned. But why humans won't do it, that was still the mystery to me. Why it is that you could sit with somebody who was in complete health distress and you could point out the obvious to them, that this food was part of the problem and that food was part of the problem, and the absence of this food was definitely part of the problem. So just do that. And I really became curious about why they wouldn't. And that's when I really started diving into what I would call food psychology and really unpacking that stuff. And so about 6 years ago, we combined those two things together to really recognize this idea. Ultimately, people will eat what they want. Giving them a set of rules is not going to help them with that, because in the end, willpower can let you hold your breath for a few minutes, but then your body's going to take over. Same thing with food. And so we had to actually go into the underneath of their psychology, onto the underside, and look at changing their wants. Beautiful thing is, if you can get somebody to stop wanting ice cream, then they don't eat it anymore.
Yeah, look, this is so powerful stuff. You're absolutely right, isn't it? Because, and in fact, if we just go back one step, you're right. It became a problem so quickly in the UK. I did some research. I'm 54 now, and the average Brit, the year I was born, was 2.5 stone lighter, right, than they are today. How on earth in just, you know, we've been around 2 million years. How on earth in just 50 years have we put on 16 kgs? I mean, it's just frightening how quickly we've got it so wrong. And that brings me back to what you're talking about now. How do we stop people wanting ice cream? Do you think the big food corporations, of which there's only about 10 of them in the world that run virtually everything we eat that's out of a package, do you think that, of course, they've made their products for maximum profit? They've also made it, of course, for maximum shelf life. But I'm pretty convinced that by putting sugar into everything, they've made it pretty addictive. So is part of the solution finding a way to kick that addiction?
You know, I often rail against the food industry. In fact, I think, you know, a couple of days ago, I made the suggestion that the only reason we're even on a lockdown is because of the food industry. And it's on the basis that had this happened 30, 40, 50 years ago, there wouldn't have been enough diabetes, obesity, hypertension, autoimmune disease for this virus to be so dangerous. I don't think of COVID-19 as being some incredible superbug. I think of it as a fairly innocuous, wimpy little bug that happens to be incredibly contagious, but very dangerous in a population that has a disastrous food production, food marketing, and food regulation policies around it. So, but in as much as I like to blame the food industry, I think what we really have to do is blame the slow progression toward us satisfying our cravings and desires rather than us satisfying our nutritional requirements. What I mean is this. If you and I, 100,000 years ago, and let's be, you know, I think we can really put agriculture as probably starting about 30,000 years ago. Let's imagine that you and I have this experience. 6 weeks ago, I was with the Hadza Bushmen in East Africa, and we went to one of their camps, and I've been visiting them for 10 years. You know, they don't grow food. They don't keep livestock. They're hunter-gatherers. And I got to one of their camps. I'd been visiting them a long time. I know the various campsites that we've been to. I'd actually been to this one before. And you know what? There was a plant growing there. There was a plant that they were being very protective of. Now, in this case, it happened to be a cannabis plant. But the point of the story is still valid, is that I was like, what happened? How did you, like, they were watering it. Like, what's going on? How did you become agriculturists? And they go, we don't know. That's usually where we throw the old seeds, and one grew. And we're like, oh my God. See, they had never seen that before. They'd never thought to them that they could grow it themselves. It's not the way they think. And I think if 30,000 years ago, you and I were walking through sub-Saharan Africa and we got to one of our camps and we looked and went, oh my God, the food is growing where we threw the old food last time. You don't think we can control this stuff, do you? And at the point and time that you and I make that realization 30,000 years ago is where it starts to go wrong. Because as we start choosing which food to grow, we're going to choose the yummiest food.
Yeah, that's very
right. Then it starts going wrong. Right at that point in time, the minute we can control food production, we go, yeah, we could grow that bitter green thing over there. Or we could grow this bright red thing over here. That's
we could do strawberries or sprouts. Oh, let's go strawberries.
There you go. And so we started preferentially growing things with sweeter flavor. Then we started genetically modifying those things through breeding, because everybody thinks GMO is only one way. The way we think of it at WildFit is that GMO is three ways. Natural selection is genetic modification over hundreds of thousands of years. Then there's direct gene manipulation, which is the dreaded super fast GMO. But there's the breeding, selective breeding, which is how we have all these dog breeds, right? We have incredible genetic control. And we've been doing that. Like, okay, you're 54, I'm 50. How big was a strawberry when you were a little boy?
Yeah, but it was never the same shape twice. Yeah.
And now they're like the size of an apple, and apples are the size of a melon, and melons are, so it's not just the food manufacturers, it's us. And now it's us going to the store and buying what they're making. And every time we buy what they're making, we support them to sell more of that. Now, I think inside that, the profit-driven nature of the food industry has also become unbelievably evil. I mean, I think the food industry is significantly more manipulative and evil than the tobacco industry ever was. The tobacco industry was just saying, hey, take this thing that's obviously bad for you and make it sexy and cool. I mean, the food industry is saying, take this substance, which is you need, which you have no choice about, you've got to eat, and let's like diminish its nutritional quality, because then you'll have to eat more. And let's add these chemically addictive things like caffeine and sugar, so you'll lose your own sense of freedom and you won't even be able to choose for yourself anymore. And then let's hire the best psychologists in the world and develop marketing campaigns that will write so deep into your subconscious that you won't be able to get through Easter without a Cadbury cream egg.
Yeah, and then let's hire the biggest lobbying departments the world has ever seen, just in case we get caught out with any of those things. Maybe we miss and drop a ball somewhere. Let's have the biggest lobbying department so that we can cover this shit up. Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, in the UK, I don't know, but this is big in America. But in the UK now, and across the whole of Europe, we have this thing called the big one's called Just Eat, and what they're a middleman, little software company. Little, talk about that in a second. They sit between all the late night takeaways in your home, and they aggregate and they collate and put it. Yeah, so now you can have your fish and chips, your doner kebab, your McDonald's. You can have anything you want, anything. But of course, it's all crap. Late at night, within 2 minutes. Do you know what? This company is now in the FTSE 100 in the UK, and employs, and I've got this on good authority, they'll sue me if I'm wrong, they employ probably the largest, if not one of the largest lobbying departments in the UK, because they know at some point they're going to get found out. At some point there's going to be some cases where kids had their nice meal at home, hopefully quite nutritional, but then at 11 o'clock at night got into that habit of just takeaway, going to bed with just chemically enhanced. Anyway, get me off that one. So let's go back just one step then. So you're absolutely right. It will only probably change when we as consumers change and vote with our feet, and we start demanding real whole foods. And it'll only start changing when the organic cauliflowers and broccoli sell out first, and supermarkets are left with stuff that's chemically enhanced. How do we start to make that change then, if they are making the food addictive?
You know, that's where we talk about food consciousness. One of the things we talk about in WildFit is this concept of super consciousness. In other words, you have your conscious mind, and we only live in that conscious mind for a few percent of the day. The rest of the time, we're really running some form of autopilot. And as long as we are running on autopilot, then it really serves the food manufacturers to advertise to our subconscious so that our autopilot makes the decisions they want it to make. And that's why somebody will make a conscious decision, often on December 31st, that they're now going to turn their diet around, and they'll be able to consciously hold on with willpower for hours sometimes, or maybe even days, or maybe weeks. And then what happens is the body will take over, especially if they've made the mistake of doing one of these ridiculous, like exercise your calories away, or even count your calorie rubbish, right? Then now the person's in calorie deficit. The body's going, holy crap, we're starving. And the hungrier you get, the more flexible your food rules become. The body simply takes over. Exactly the same as I said before. Hold your breath somewhere around the 2-minute mark. If you can even get there, the body's going to take over. And so that's what happens to a lot of us now is we go on a diet. And then what happens to us is we use willpower, and then the body takes over and it returns to norm. So what we have to start doing is retraining the subconscious. We have to be looking at the patterns that were created in our childhood, like you fell down, you skinned your knee, you were crying. Your parents would do anything to distract you from your pain. They come over and they gave you a milk dud or a chocolate chip cookie, and you were like, oh my God, I'm no longer in tears, but plus I feel loved. And you wonder why at 45 years old, you want to grab that cookie because it's going to help you to feel loved. We need to go in and help people undo that so that they can start having a super conscious relationship. And the way we define that is that your conscious mind and your body are aligned. In other words, you can trust yourself.
Yeah.
You have real freedom. You actually can eat what you want, when you want, as much as you want without guilt, because your conscious and unconscious mind are aligned.
That's so powerful and so true. I mean, you know, I've written 4 or 5 health books now, and it is not about willpower, is it? It is about making people understand, but then realizing about how powerful, because the subconscious brain is trying to keep you alive, isn't it? So if it's trying to keep you alive, and if you are calorie deficit and you are late afternoon and you're hungry and you know you shouldn't eat those cookies or that pack of crisps, the subconscious mind, it's hungry. And you know, we have homeostasis, and one of the things Jason Fung taught me, I'm sure you know Dr. Jason Fung, he said that the problem with, and this is why we have to learn to fast, is that if you drop 200 calories from what your body needs, then the body's got to stay alive, so it will down-regulate your metabolism at 500 calories to match. And if you go the whole way and drop down to 1,000 calories a day, and you're like 1,000 less than you should be, or 2,000, homeostasis will try and down everything. And you've got this fight going on in your brain now because your subconscious is saying, I'm starving, I know I need more energy, so I'm going to have to keep down-regulating all my energy and drop my metabolic rate. And that's why fasting is good, because once you learn to fast and burn your own body fat, then your body's never, ever hungry. And it is, isn't it? It's this conscious battle. You're absolutely right. I've never thought about this before. The subconscious brain is doing more of the decision-making around food probably than the conscious most of the time.
That's where we've really had our big success. When I first started working with clients, you know, when I got into this, I would talk to my friends, do this, don't do that. You can turn it all around. I talk to my clients, do this, don't do that, you know, because I was mostly teaching entrepreneurship through businessfreedom.com. And that's where we were. But the clients weren't changing. And then that's when I decided to look at this psychology component. About 6 years ago, I took 8 people and put them through a class, a 90-day program. And all 8 of them stayed with me the whole 90 days, which I thought that was pretty amazing. But more than that, all 8 of them radically changed their relationship with food. So I knew we were on to something. Then we did another 8 and another 8. And then a famous author in America did the program as well with his wife. They changed their bodies so dramatically that he was getting ready to do a webinar one day. And he looked at the marketing picture on the webinar. He goes, that's not who I see in the mirror. Where'd you get that picture? And they go, well, it's from 3 months ago at your last photo shoot. He changed so much. Then he told his clients about it. And all of a sudden our program just got launched all over the place. Like we went from it being a total hobby business. We didn't even have a website. It was just a hobby to now 20,000 people in 130 countries around the world. Yeah. And really one of the biggest reasons is, let's say 2 biggest reasons, is that first of all, we've developed a way to make sure people actually stay on the program. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the founders of Zumba did the program, and he said to me, he goes, you know, all these people all around the world are hunting around for a diet they can stick to. What you've done is created a lifestyle that sticks to them. And that's really been the key here, is to make that change at a subconscious level so that they don't have to use willpower, so they actually feel free.
Yeah.
And then the other component of it is setting it up so that it's lasting beyond the 90 days.
Yeah.
You know, because as we know, most people go on a diet, when the diet's over, then they just go back to norm. And so that was the other component of this, to get it to, but you know what blew me away? It's the side effects. I mean, okay, you know, obviously weight loss is one of them. We don't work on weight loss ever. It's not about weight loss. It's about health balance. And when you have health balance, your body will gain or lose the weight that it needs to get you optimal. It just does, as you know. But what really blew me away when I started this was the type 2 diabetes reversals. The people calling me up and going, my doctor just took me off my blood pressure meds. My thyroid support medication is no longer necessary. My autoimmune disease is either dramatically better or even recovered. When we started seeing all of that, some of which we expected, but we were truly blown away. And then here was the big one. The number 3 out of, when we survey clients around the world that have done the program, that have gone through changing themselves to a primal living style diet, whether, you know, happening to be through our program in this case, the 3rd most common reported benefit was, I'm happy again. And I don't think people realize that they're very often giving away their future happiness for a temporary sweetness or a temporary pleasure.
I say real food equals great mood. And it is so, so true. It's so, so true. People have to start to realize that, you know, sugar is a drug. In the UK, I don't know about America, I've even found companies ingesting chicken breasts with sugar, right? I mean, what is that all about? Well, you know, is it not just to make us addictive? And like nearly all addictions, you might get some short-term pleasure, but pleasure and happiness are two totally different sides of the scale. You know, short-term pleasure, you know, you just want more and more and more and more of that. But short-term pleasure can lead to unhappiness. And I find when you start eating real food the whole time, then you just are more happy. Yeah, and eventually, when you start to get your taste buds back, because you've got to take control of your taste buds. We've all been, you know, our taste buds, if you're not eating proper food, even your taste buds have been attacked, have even been grabbed and hold of by the big food companies, because your taste buds, if you don't eat real food, aren't what they should be. But within 21 days of eating real food, your taste buds come back to what they should be. And then you're getting pleasure out of real food and genuine happiness. Why is it that they put in sugar into everything? What do you think?
So, you know, I had one of my biggest sugar breakthroughs in my apartment in Weston-super-Mare. No kidding. I'm in my apartment. I'm getting ready to go to a meeting, and I just quickly make myself. This is 20 years ago, and I just quickly make myself a little, like, you know, pasta with tomato sauce back then. And I sit down and I take one forkful of it, and I'm like, pah! I spit it out. It's obviously off. Something's not right. So I look for the best before date, and it's well in date. And I'm like, well, that's weird. So I smell it. Smells okay. So I taste it. Actually, just a little bit of it. It does taste okay. What's going on? So I have another, and I realize what it is that I had largely given up sugar at that point. And I looked on the ingredients list, and this is like Prego or Ragu or one of these, you know, and sugar was the number 2 ingredient. Like, I was like, you're what? The number 2 ingredient. Yeah. And that's what really started getting me to read labels, right? I started really paying attention to where sugar was, and it's everywhere. You know, it's the number 2. My parents were very good about breakfast cereals, man. We did not get the good ones. We didn't get the chocolate covered frosted sugar bombs and Fruit Loops and all that kind of stuff. We weren't allowed to have frosted we had to have Corn Flakes and Rice Krispies, the good ones. The number 2 ingredient on both of them is sugar. Yeah. And then what did we do? Sprinkle more on top of them. Yeah. In the case of Frosted Flakes, it's the number 2 ingredient is corn, because the number 1 ingredient is sugar. The number 1 ingredient. And we feed this to children. And then the cereal manufacturers pay. My company in England was we did barcode labeling and wireless networking systems for retail companies. Our clients were people like JD Sports and Debenhams and these guys. And you know, I'll tell you, in the grocery stores, the food manufacturers pay to put the bright colored sugarful cereal at the 3-foot height mark so the kids can see it, so that they'll pester their parents. Sugar is unbelievably addictive, but not only is it addictive, which makes you want to buy more, of course, which means I think people need to hear this. Making something addictive is designed to take away your freedom. It's really important to understand that. To make something addictive is to take away your freedom. And so that's one of the reasons the sugar's there. And then another reason the sugar there is to take away your short-term freedom as well. Because when you spike your blood sugar, there's a natural evolutionary response. And that is to produce a bunch of insulin and then to have a craving for sugar. This was to make sure that in the late summer, fall, preparing for the winter, we would eat enough of the fruit that was out there, because our stomachs are normally only about the size of our fist, right? So if you and I are out there walking and oh my God, look, there's some berries on the tree, we're not going to go snack on them. We're going to binge on them. We're going to binge on them because as we eat them, our blood sugar is going to spike. Then our insulin's going to come up behind that. Then we're going to have insulin shock. That's going to make us eat more sugar. And we're going to eat enough of it that we fatten up and survive the winter. But the trouble is that old evolutionary process is killing us now. And the food manufacturers are using it against us.
Yeah, I'm smiling because I wrote something very similar in my book. And I went, because of course we have this hormone called leptin that's supposed to stop us overeating. But I came to realize, well, I say realize, I've got to be careful what I say here. It's a hypothesis, but my hypothesis, it doesn't work with carbohydrates and sugar, because if it did, we wouldn't have gorged on those apples. And if we didn't gorge on those apples, we wouldn't have got through the winter months. You know, nature designed us for leptin to tell us that we're full when we've had enough meat and we've had enough protein. But hey, it's got to turn a blind eye to sugar, because otherwise, you're absolutely right. You know, the whole purpose of putting fruit out there in the autumn by nature was we'd gorge on it, because we didn't have fridges in the caves. So we'd gorge, and the whole body was designed to grab it quickly because it couldn't stay in the stomach, and store it as body fat to get us through the winter. So I love that we're talking on, as I said, we were two peas from the same pod. I want to share something with you, because you might not have seen this. A great doctor in the UK, Dr. David Unwin, and his team, in the laboratories, took all the breakfast cereals. And what they did is they looked at all the popular breakfast cereals, and they said, right, not the added sugar, but the actual sugar in the actual thing itself. What does it break down to? So the cornflake manufacturer Kellogg says, well, you know, serving size is 30 grams. Well, 30 grams is so small, nobody has 30 grams, I would argue. My 12-year-old was eating a size that was more like 80 grams. But look at that, even the cornflakes themselves break down in your blood glucose level to the equivalent of 8 teaspoons full of sugar. But if you were to say have a 80 gram, more like my son, you're close to 20 grams of sugar just in the cornflakes in your bloodstream. So your parents might not have been giving you the nice, pretty, color-coded ones, but even cornflakes themselves, which I fed my kids for years. Because here's the difference, isn't it? It's a two-part problem. It's the deceit around what is healthy and what's not from the manufacturers, and therefore, you know, my latest book's called Fat and Furious, because I'm furious that actually the truth just wasn't out there. Because I was feeding, I've got 7 children, I was feeding them orange juice, apple juice, bananas, toast, cereals, all the things we now know turns into sugar, and now we know that that's true, that it turns into sugar. Now we've got to battle about the big food company. But the bit that was missing in my jigsaw till talking to you today is once you even know that knowledge, my God, you've now got an internal battle with the brain, because the subconscious is battling you the whole time to keep that food coming in.
You know, I often feel as though it's like humans have this little app, and the app is, if I'm alive on Tuesday, whatever I did on Monday must have been good. And that app is no longer useful, because we're all alive on Tuesday. Like, there's nothing threatening our existence anymore. Even now with COVID-19, the truth is we live in the safest times in the history of human times. Our ancestors faced death on a regular basis, death from wild animals, other tribes, exposure from nature. I mean, life was hard. And so we're now at a place where we live in the safest times ever, but we have this old throwback. And the throwback was, if I'm alive on Tuesday, whatever I did on Monday must have been good. And so that little piece of software means that when we pick up a bad habit and we're still alive the next day, that bad habit is very easy to integrate. And emotions play a big role in this. Here's one of the best examples I can give you is I had this client, and she had done incredibly well changing her relationship with food. She wrote to me, she's in her 40s. She said, this is the first time I have felt comfortable to be in a 2-piece swimsuit at the beach since I was a teenager. Thank you so much for giving me my body back. But I've got one problem. And I'm like, oh, what's the problem? She goes, I feel powerless around icing. I feel really powerless around icing. And I'm like, okay, let's talk about icing. I said, did you and your mom used to bake together when you were a little girl? And she's like, yeah. And I go, did your mom make homemade icing? Because I'm thinking maybe your mom let her lick out the bowl or something. And no, my mom bought canned icing. And my theory's out the window. And I go, well, tell me what happened. And she goes, well, I would hear the can opener and I would come running down the stairs because I'd know she was making the icing. And I'd hear the can opener and I'd hide under the counter and I'd grab a spoon out of the drawer and I'd reach up, feeling around on the shelf above me, trying to find the icing, and I'd scoop it out. And my mom would always let me get 2 teaspoons out. Later I realized she was letting me, she'd always let me get 2 teaspoons out before she would catch me and stop me. And we would laugh and giggle and it would be so much fun. And then we'd bake together. And I'm like, okay, so how's your relationship with your mother right now? And she says, my mom's in early stage dementia. And I said, and so you're eating icing to try to get close to your mother again? And she burst into tears because the truth sets you free. And she saw it clearly that that's what actually it was, but she didn't know it because that's that thing of the subconscious, the body taking over. The body had linked up that hugely positive emotion to the icing. And so she was powerless. And of course, once she saw it clearly, she was done. She saw it and she was done. For some people, just seeing it is enough. For other people, you got to go a little deeper. But in her case, she saw it. Icing was no longer a thing for her. It wasn't going to make her any closer to her mother.
That's a really, really powerful story. What about people that maybe haven't got that emotional link with the family and for some reason they've read all the books, they kind of get now that carbohydrates, first of all, there's the camp that still don't believe what we're talking about, but let's say the camp that do believe what we're talking about, that look, too many carbs, or too much sugar, too much processed food, carbs, processed food, that is the problem for diabetes. In fact, back to your story there, we now believe that that Alzheimer's, which my mother's got sadly, is diabetes type 3. We think that one of the root cause there again is the relation with insulin and sugar and so on. But let's look at that camp that do get it now and kind of understand this onslaught of sugar. They understand what you're saying about sugar's been putting into loads and loads of different products to make us addicted to the products. Maybe they haven't got that emotional story and they can't just flick the switch straight away like that. Where's their starting point?
Well, I mean, the cheesy way for me to put it is they can go on iTunes and do our 7-day sugar challenge and probably have a huge, if they go look for WildFit, they'll find it and we'll help them. But right now, let me help. And it's very simple. There's something that we discuss in the WildFit community called the food timeline. And why we create the food timeline is that when we are in subconscious behavior, we're not conscious of what's happening. We allow things. It's like, that feeling like when you're driving the car and you suddenly realize you haven't seen the last couple miles, like, oh my God, what was I even thinking about? And so we eat like that a lot. And one of the reasons that we eat like that a lot is that nature was very dangerous. In other words, you could never be fully focused on your food because there might be a lion or a hyena wanting to take you, right? So you kind of eat, looking around for danger. And so you had to be good at subconscious eating. So now what we do is we created the food timeline so that people could slow down and pay conscious attention. And it's almost like having a sportscaster in your head going, well, Eric's gone into the kitchen now, and kind of like slowing it down and seeing actually what happens. So here's an interesting thing. When somebody is feeling low, they're low energy, low emotion, they're just feeling low, they're going to go eat some food, and they're going to eat food for a reason other than nutritional sustenance. They're going to eat the food because it's going to make them feel better. That's where part of the problem lies. But here's where it's really manipulative and really careful. We have to really pay attention here. When do we start feeling better? If I'm feeling low and I am going to go eat ice cream, when do I actually start feeling better? Do I start feeling better with the first taste of ice cream? Or do I start feeling better when I smell the ice cream? Or do I first start feeling better when I grab the ice cream bucket? Or do I first start feeling better when I decide to buy it or to eat it if it's already in the freezer? And the answer is the minute I open the rebellion, the minute I go, and the more willpower I'm trying to use the greater the rebellion and the greater the dopamine and the greater the positive chemical release I'm going to have because I'm rebelling. And so it's like, I'm not allowed to have it. The more I'm not allowed to have it, the more feel-good chemicals I'm going to produce when I give myself permission to do it. It's a greater feeling of freedom. So it's here's what happens is I'm feeling bad and I go, oh, you know what? I know we're on a diet, but I'm going to have the ice cream. And immediately that happens, we start producing feel-good chemicals in our body. Why that's fascinating is now we eat the ice cream, but we were already feeling good. And those feel-good chemicals get linked up to the ice cream. It was never about the ice cream. It was about the rebellion. It was about the permission. But now the feeling good is linked up to the ice cream. And more than that, and this is insane, but certain feel-good chemicals can make things feel good. When somebody, smokes weed or they take ecstasy or something, it makes things feel good and taste good. Well, that's because those natural chemicals in our body do the same thing. So now those built-in chemicals are making the sweetness in the ice cream even nicer than it really is. And so we end up addicted. We end up trapped. And so one of the things people can do is notice that food timeline. They're feeling a little low. They're feeling a little down. They go, I'm going to have an ice cream. Notice the feel-good spike starts before the food. And if that's true, then isn't it possible you could find another way to create that feeling that didn't involve slamming your body with unforgivable quantities of sugar, horrible levels of dairy products, and all the other crap that's in ice cream?
Yeah, that's brilliant. I've never really thought about it like that. I think if you add what you've just said there to, if anybody's ever read Robert Lustig's book, I think I've got it here somewhere. Yeah, it's called Hacking the American Mind. If you've not read this, you'll love this book because he talks a lot about the difference between happiness and pleasure. And the problem with pleasure and that dopamine rush is, and this is what the whole crux of his book is, happiness and pleasure are two different things. And yet, what you really want is happiness. Pleasure is that short moment, that short reward, that short, that taste on the lips, that life on the hips, all that sort of stuff, that short reward of a can of Coke, that short reward and we need some pleasure in life because without that we wouldn't have sex. Without sex, it wouldn't be a human race. But his point is this, that big companies in America know that it's all about psychology. So what do they say on their advertising? They don't say pleasure, they say happiness, happy hour, happy meal, I'm loving it, happy, happy, happy. They try and sell us happiness, but what they're really selling us isn't happiness. What they're really selling us is pleasure and reward. And pleasure and reward leads eventually to being unhappy. And what and if you merge that with what you've just said, which is absolutely brilliant, is your brain, because you think, and I'll confess, it happened to me last night, right? It happened to me last night. I was going to go fasting all day long, and I do a lot of fasting, but for some reason last night, my body didn't switch in the ketones on. There was some biscuits on the side. We have these one called digestives in the UK, and I had one. I thought I'll just have one. I had two. I had three. I had four. And then I woke up this morning, I felt rubbish, I felt angry with myself, and I was like, how on earth, after preaching to the world through all your books, did that happen? And I think you kind of just explained to me why. Because I hadn't got into ketosis yesterday, I don't know why the switch didn't happen, the body took over, and it made me have, I think it is, it could be I'm just so weak, but I think it made me have the first one, and then because I thought I really, really enjoyed it, and maybe because I thought I was being extra naughty, nobody would know I had a second one.
Yep. And it's so perfect because likely digestives, likely a grandparent or somebody gave them to you, and you were only allowed to have one or two, but you sometimes snack a third one. And so it gave you this feeling of, there's probably some childhood event like that for you. But then it's even worse than that because you go, I'm only going to have one. But the conscious mind is going, what? No, you're not. Body's taken over, right? The captain's saying no, the crew's rebelling, and a mutiny's underway. And then you have one, and then the crew does this. See, you're not in control, Captain. Watch this. And the captain's like, no. And the captain's self-esteem is going down, 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 down. And the crew is getting stronger. And they go, you thought we would only have one. Watch this. So then you eat a second one. Now the captain's self-esteem is I'm losing control of the ship. And now the captain's going, we may as well have a third.
Yeah, might as well jump off. Might as well jump overboard, yeah. That is so true. It's been fascinating. We've got so many questions coming in. Are you happy to answer some of the questions we've got on YouTube? Right, here we go. Let's jump to the top. Right, please do. Mohammed Iftikhar says, good morning, Steve and Eric. Do you agree that rice and fish eating people are more energetic compared to others? Well, that's an interesting thought.
You know, I think that people very often are trying to draw like immediate relationships to justify a particular diet or what have you. You know, if you told me that it was rice and fish eating people, are they more energetic than somebody else? I'd say, well, it depends. It depends on the quality of the rice. It depends on whether they eat the rice and the fish at the same time. It depends on whether the fish is deep fried. And I'll say this, there's no perfect single food. There's no RDA. The RDA is one of the biggest, you know, it's just wrong. Yeah, and by the way, I don't know what you guys call it in the UK. I can't remember, but in America, we call it the RDA, recommended daily allowance.
Yeah, NRV in the UK. Yeah.
There you go. It's just, it doesn't work. The fact is that human beings evolved for cyclical eating patterns based on Mother Nature's seasons. And so, yes, fish would be a season, but then all of a sudden it wouldn't be so available anymore. And sure, fruit is even a season, but it's only there for a couple of weeks. It's not something, you know, it's not like you can just go pick fruit anytime you want in nature. So no, I don't believe that somebody who ate fish and rice all the time would be more energetic. In fact, I think that they'd start having issues with, they'd have a bunch of different malnutrition issues. And it's something that's very healthy now, but it's not healthy another month later. You need to have a variety of different plant and animal-based foods, in my opinion.
Do you find, because you've been out in the bush a lot, I find when I travel around, whether it be the Maasai or literally just before lockdown, I was up in the mountains in Nepal. Do you find that when you're out with tribal communities that they eat very diverse, but there's not many things on the same plate? In fact, quite often it's just one thing at a time. So it might be goat for 3 days, and then the next week it might all be a berry, or it might be something else. But one of the problems with modern food, that our body's not used to breaking down so many different things all at once. Whereas in our history and still in tribes today, it's pretty much all carbs on one meal, or all fat on the next meal, or protein on the next meal. And then that kind of answers that question as well, isn't it? It's that there is no one superfood. There are some that are super healthy, but you want to have diversity in one sense, although not too much carbs, certainly not processed carbs. Now, let me retract all that. What you want is complete diversity as long as it's natural.
So I think you guys have a picture of me like making fire with the Hadza. I think you've got that picture, and yeah, there it is. That's the one. Now, what's happening right there is they're making fire, and they're using friction to make that fire because that's the level of technology they're at. Now, what happens when we go hunting? I'll tell you that I've had this experience a number of times, but about 2 years ago, I went and I did a week-long embedded stay with them, which is incredibly difficult. You're talking about huge temperatures, not a lot of water. It's tough living. And I woke up one morning and the chief says to me, let's go hunting. Now, I'd been hunting with them a few times before, but it'd always been like a 2 or 3 hour hunt. This is going to be an all-day hunt. So we head out. We go off hunting. Great. Super exciting. Well, I carry my phone with me, not because there's any signal, but because what I want is I want the pedometer. I want to know how many steps we do. We do 27 miles that day. Just take that on. I ran the London Marathon in the year 2000, and they told me how scary and dangerous it was going to be to run on the cobblestone street section. Like I would have paid anything for cobblestone streets. I'm talking thorns that are trying to rip my face apart, and cliffs and rocks. I mean, we're talking 27 of the toughest miles of my entire life. And we didn't get anything that day. But you know what we ate that day? Was we ate some berries along the way and some root vegetables that we dug up. And that's all we got that day. That's it. That was the day. Yeah. The very next morning, just think about this. The next morning, the chief and I have a little bit of we've known each other a long time, 10 years now. And there's a slightly competitive edge between us. Sometimes it's kind of fun because when they do have tourists and anthropologists and people that come and see them, they are always the ones teaching. They're always the ones. But one day we were sitting around the fire, and I could hear these birds off in the distance. And I was born in South Africa. And so I spent a lot of time in the bush, and I did one of these. And all the bushmen grabbed their bows and arrows because they shoot the birds. They're, where's the bird? And so then I taught them a bunch of different bird calls. And so he and I have this thing of like, I got to be the first pale face that taught him something about the bush. So the next morning, he's kind of got this cheeky look on his face. He goes, you ready to go hunting again? Again, most people that run a marathon take 3 or 4 days off afterward. I've just run the toughest marathon of my life, which I didn't even train for because I didn't know I was doing it. And now he wants me to go again. We get up, we go 17 miles that day after doing 27 the day before. And you know what? The reason it was 17 miles instead of 27 is we killed a bush pig, which is like kind of like Pumbaa from The Lion King, only much bigger. And we killed a bush pig. And immediately, what do? Make a fire, throw the pig on the fire. It softens it up. They then cut it up and they cut it into its sections. And then we all carry and I carry a leg back because there's no way you can carry this 180-pound pig back to camp. And you know what's really interesting as well is they immediately took all the ribs, broke them off, stuck them in the ground around the fire and started cooking the ribs. And then it dawned on us, the reason they were doing the ribs first is it's just not economically worth carrying the ribs back to camp because there's such a high percentage of bone compared to meat. Yeah. So they eat those now and carry the big meat sections back for the village. But you know what we weren't eating at that point? Carbs. We weren't eating anything else. It's not, nobody was like, we've got the pig. Where's the potatoes and onions? Where's that stuff? Like, no, we eat this thing. And so I am a big believer of mono meals. I believe that our digestion is quite specific. We know, for example, that when somebody prepares to eat carbohydrates, they produce different fluids in their mouth and they produce different digestive fluids when they're going to eat a protein. So I believe that when we combine that stuff, we're just making the job really complicated. And our ancestors, I'm not saying they never did it. I'm sure there were times where they ate some root vegetables and then, oh my God, look, we can hunt. And they did it, but it was accidental, not intentional, and probably quite rare.
Yeah, no, it's really, really interesting. I was up in a mountain in Doha, literally before lockdown, like I was saying, and the whole sort of, we're 3,000 meters above sea level. We're 2 days from the nearest road. Some of these children up in the hills had never been down to the valley floor. And that night, same thing, we'd walked and walked. I'm there for slightly different reasons. I'm there in my other cap looking for gemstones. But we'd walked and walked all day. And we hadn't sadly got the measure, so I don't know how long, but it was like 15 hours, non-stop walk. And we eventually came to the outcrop of these little huts where we were staying, and they caught this goat, and then all of a sudden there was like the 10 of us that had been walking all together all day. All of a sudden there were children coming from everywhere, and there was about 30 people in the end. And I said, "What's going on here? Is it a party?" They went, "No, this is the way we live up here because the goat won't last 2 days, 3 days. It'll just go off. There'll be rats. There'll be insects. So they don't have fridges or anything, and that's the way they lived up there. And that night, all we ate was goat. And then we walked the next day to Doha, to where the next mine was. We're now at like 4,000 meters above sea level. Same thing happened again, but this time it wasn't meat. It was rice, and I almost turned my nose up at it, but I was so hungry because I'm so anti-rice normally. But we had to have it, and all we ate was rice that night. And again, out of nowhere come all these kids and villagers because that's the way they live out there. Anyway, the point was that I met this one guy, and through the interpreter, we worked out, he didn't know, but we worked it out, he must have been over 100 years old. So you can live, the body is designed, I believe, for not lots of different things all at once, but just one or two things on the plate. Exactly like you just said, the body isn't designed for this onslaught. And that's one or two food types. Just think when we buy a packaged food and it's got like those 20 different ingredients in. Frightening. Right, we've got loads of questions coming in for Eric. Hi Eric, in your opinion, are there healthy benefits of becoming gluten-free? And if so, what are they?
It's kind of a loaded question in my opinion. I imagine you and I agree about this, but yes, there are healthy benefits in avoiding gluten. I believe that I don't believe gluten's good for anybody. Some people are lucky enough to have an acute response, so they've got pain, and so they're motivated not to have it. And the other people are less lucky because they don't get that pain response, but they do get the other problems that come with it. But the trouble is that these days we tend to want to look at one thing as meaning healthy, like organic is supposed to be healthy or natural is supposed to mean healthy. Well, plutonium is natural. Like I'm not going to eat that, right? So, and I think we have to be careful with the phrase gluten-free. If you are eating, say, gluten-free pasta, then what you're doing is taking the one really difficult thing to digest and taking it out and still dealing with a food that really isn't an ideal food. Now, hear me, I'm not saying I never eat gluten-free pasta. That's not true. What I'm saying is I certainly wouldn't do it on any kind of regularity. If I want to have pasta, which I clearly know is a throwback to some childhood experience, if I want to have it, I choose to have the gluten-free because it's not going to hurt me as much, and I find it's not as addictive for me that way. But I'm not lying to myself that the gluten-free pasta is now good for me. It's just less consequences.
Yeah. Your point there
or less immediate consequences.
Yeah. Your point there was great, isn't it? That people that are gluten intolerant, and in fact intolerant of other things like lactose intolerant, in some ways, you're so lucky. You're the lucky ones that you flick that switch off. You know, these things are, you know, adults aren't supposed to drink milk. That's just nature. We're not supposed to drink milk. And yet, yeah, we feel sorry for people that are lactose intolerant or glucose intolerant, gluten intolerant. But at the end of the day, maybe you're the lucky ones. Please, what supplements help to stop carb craving? Daniela says, are there any supplements that could help to stop carb craving?
You know, I'm not a super big fan of, let me say this. I'm not really a big fan of taking this pill to justify that thing or what have you. And let me explain. There are now sort of enzymes you can take that can help you break your sugar down. And there's pills you can take. Like if you go to JJ Virgin, you'll find that she's got really great supplements that mean if you decide you want to eat a bunch of gluten, that can stop you having the gluten reaction and all that kind of stuff. But I'll tell you, and this is the tough part, the best way, in my opinion, to get off carbs is first to switch carbs and then to get off them. And here's what I mean by that. There are carbs that are actually evolutionarily part of our life. Like we've been eating fruit for millions of years. You could argue that the idea of humans is about a 5 or 6 million year old experiment. You know, the first upright apes, you know, or say 5 million years old, they were eating fruit. You know, we have an evolutionary relationship with fruit. That said, we spent the last 2 million of those years or more on the savannah where fruit was very rare and only available for a few weeks at a time. So it certainly wasn't something we were eating all the time. So what do you think would happen when fruit, say, went out of season? Well, we'd be upset about it. We might be a little depressed. We might be a little grumpy with each other. But at the end of the day, after some days, we'd be like, oh, well, it's over. It's gone. And that's because the carb addiction can actually go away. It can. The trouble we have is that the carbs we have are like heroin. I mean, we're refined sugar. It's unbelievably addictive, far more than fruit sugar is. And by the way, even fruit sugar, once you take it out of the fruit and process it, it's just refined sugar. Just because it says fructose doesn't mean it's good for you. Yeah. But if you're eating it in an apple, well, hey, if you're eating in an apple occasionally, not bad. But if you're eating apples every single day, also bad. So what I would suggest is this, that you take a look at the junk carbs and you make a period of time where you switch over to healthy carbs, which might be a little bit of fruit here and there, maybe some honey, but nothing else, and not fake sweeteners. That won't help either. Then what'll happen is that getting off the fruit will actually be a lot easier than getting off the junk carbs. And then you'll find about a week after giving up fruit for a while, you'll be like, oh, it was a week of hell, but now I'm okay. And then you'll be in this beautiful state where your body is not calling for the carbs until one day when your memory calls back and goes, man, I'd love some watermelon today. And then you'll eat some watermelon. And then guess what? The next day you'll want fruit again. But it's not a craving that can ever, in my opinion, go away permanently. It's designed to be triggered. It's designed to come back. But if you're conscious about it, you can break it. And the best way to break it is to simply not have it.
That's such a, you know, I hadn't thought about that before, Eric, that you probably can't break it completely, because if for 9 months of the year through evolution we didn't have any carbs because the fruit wasn't out, then when we saw the tree full of apples, we would have just turned our back and walked away, and nature didn't want that to happen. So maybe we can't ever completely break that craving for carbs. It's just understanding about food. And therefore understanding that, you know, if you are in any way at all metabolically challenged, diabetes, overweight or whatever, it's just understanding that really, you know, it is the carbs that put the weight on, and therefore you've got to cut, you know, them right down. But that's really great advice from you, Eric. Fantastic. What do you think of tofu, says Jackie from Glasgow? Tofu, sorry.
I just like, no. I don't know what else to say. I mean, first of all, you want to limit your relationship with soybeans anyway. I mean, I like edamame at the sushi restaurant like anybody else, and I'll have it from time to time. But, you know, you want to limit your relationship with soy. There's barely, I doubt you can even, unless you happen to be traveling around the backwoods of Indonesia, you're not going to find soy that isn't massively genetically modified. And then on top of that, even if it wasn't genetically modified, apparently it's full of estrogen. And now what do we do? Like, how do you even make tofu? You process it and you turn it into this lump of nothingness. I mean, no, I've never been a fan of tofu. I don't think it's a good idea.
That's come across loud and clear. Sean says, how many meals a day should I be eating? Is skipping meals good or bad for weight loss? Also, are there specific times of the day that are better for metabolism?
These are great questions. We did not evolve. We did not evolve as animals that had meal times. That's like, I'm gonna say that that's distinctly British behavior. I'm kidding. I'm sort of kidding, but honestly, like when I lived in England, it's so funny. You go to your friend and go, "Are you hungry?" And they look at their watch, like, "Oh, let me tell you if I'm hungry." It's like it's not quite mealtime. We didn't evolve for meal times. We evolved for food availability. So we go hunting. Did we get something? We eat. Oh, look, we found something. We ate. We have incredibly small stomachs normally, but our stomachs are very expandable. And they're designed to be expandable for occasional binges. For example, we just killed a mammoth. And you know, as you pointed out, we don't have a way of storing the meat. So we want to eat as much of it as we can. And so the stomach will stretch, allowing that binge to happen. And the same thing happens when fruit comes in season. Oh my God, look, fruit's on the tree. It won't be here tomorrow. Eat as much of it as we can. And the stomach stretches out to make that happen. Then when we go into a time where there's not as much food available, the stomach shrinks right back down to its normal size. If you let your stomach go back down to normal size, and anybody who's done anything more than a 3-day fast knows how this feels, is that the next time you try to have a meal, you can't eat nearly as much food because your stomach is at its normal size. You'd have to force it. So I don't think that meals are, I mean, look, it's fine to have meals. I'm just saying that I don't think that the idea of having 3 meals a day is a naturally evolved behavior. I think that what's much more naturally evolved is a general lifestyle of browsing with the occasional binge from a successful hunt or successful gathering. Now, that said, nature also would have made sure that, like, nature invented intermittent fasting. All these authors online that are telling you they invented intermittent fasting, they're wrong. Nature invented it. You know how nature did it? Just simply didn't let stuff be available. Like, that's it. Oh, look. And intermittent fasting didn't mean like I eat now and then I don't eat now and then I eat now and then I don't eat now. No, intermittent fasting worked like this. There's food available. Now there isn't food available. There's food available and now there's food available, but it's going to take a lot of effort to go get that food. And so you're going to have to fast while you're getting the effort to get that food. So having an empty system, having an empty digestive system is an incredibly important aspect of your health. Your digestive system needs, like any, let's say, processing plant, needs to shut down every now and again so that it can cleanse and do maintenance. If your digestive system is working all the time, it can't do that. And so you end up with all kinds of, challenges and health problems. So intermittent fasting gives that possibility. So it's not that I think there's a particular number of meals a day that you should be having. I just want to suggest to you that occasional intermittent fasting, like for example, stop eating 3 hours before you go to bed or more, even if you can handle it. And multi-day fasting from time to time is incredibly important to your health. Our ancestors were forced into it. They never had to use consciousness or willpower. When I was with the Bushmen a couple of weeks ago, I asked the chief, I said, do you guys ever go on like calorie restriction? Do you ever intentionally not eat or fast, like for religious things or holidays? He looked at me and goes, why would we do that? Yeah, it was insane. Oh, and you'll love this one. I asked him another one. I go, do you guys have depression? And they didn't understand the word. It was being translated, right? Because they have this very cool language with like these cool clicks and stuff. And so it was translated, and it was not, do they have depression? It was, do you have long-term sadness? That's the way it got translated. And he's like, no, we don't have that. If something happens that's really sad, you're sad for a day or two, maybe 3, but then you have to get on with it because you have a life to live over here. Yeah. I was like, wow, this guy should start his own YouTube channel. Like, he's got it going on. Then I asked him a really cool question. I said, do you guys have suicide? Again, they don't have a word for that. So I had to explain. Well, in our world, people sometimes kill themselves. They end their own lives. The chief, this is the look on his face. Huh? He was confused by that. And there's a guy in the back of the cave that was sleeping, and he wasn't really asleep. He was kind of half dozing, but he heard me say through the translator that in our world, people sometimes kill themselves, and busted out laughing. Now, please, he wasn't laughing that people are that depressed or sad. He was laughing because the idea of ending your own life was so alien to him. Then the chief says to me, how do they do it? He's like, how do they? I said, some of them use guns. He's like, ah! I said, some of them jump off really high buildings. He's like, that's horrible. And I said, and some of them use poison. He goes, all right, I guess if you have to do it, that might work. Like, it was so fascinating. They live such a different world than we do.
I got to tell you my favorite story. I was in a place called Wamba in Kenya with the Maasai, and I was training for a marathon. And when I got, so like 2 weeks back, when I got home, I was going to do a marathon. So I'd get up every morning, I'd go jogging. And that afternoon, we hunted down the goat. We got the goat, and he prepared it in front of me and everything. And I took the fat off. And he looked at me and he went, Steve, and he spoke a bit about it, so this wasn't for an interpreter. Steve, you go running, you take the fat off, so you be big European man. And I go, no, I go jogging and take the fat off to try and look like you, lean, strong and everything. And in broken English, he looked at me and he went, it's not working. You know, who's stupid here? You know, we've got these silly ideas that thinking, you know, jogging wasn't even invented till the late 60s when a gentleman called Mr. Cooper in America came up with the word aerobics. But, you know, we keep thinking we can out-jog a bad diet. And I never see Bushmen, I see them sprinting, I see them walking, I never see them jogging. Why would you jog anyway? You know, so we keep trying to think we can eat crap, exercise our way out of it, and none of this is in line with the development of the human body and us as a species. It's crazy. Right, let's go to a few more questions. Are you okay? Because I did say it'd only be about half an hour, but I'm loving this.
It's all good. I'd love to get to Billy's question.
Billy's question. Where's Billy? Billy
says, I see you are very against carbs. What carbs would you consider healthy?
Okay, go with that one. Go with that.
Billy, you know, let me say this. I am not against carbs. It's really funny. I've got a bunch of my friends that are, you know, into the carnivore diet thing. I've got Sean Baker coming up on my Thrive Time show. I'm going to interview him about carnivore diet. But I'll tell you that one thing to think about anytime you see somebody making claims in the diet industry or you see a scientific study done about food, look at the results and the conclusions they draw, and then compare them to our evolutionary biology, our evolutionary history, our biology. And if the diet or the scientific studies conclusions violate evolutionary biology, then probably there's a problem. And so here's what I would say. Our ancestors ate carbs. There's not a debate about that. They definitely ate carbs. They ate carbs. Now, the problem with language is that we are quite lazy with our language. So rather than coming up with a different word for every different type of carb, we've just got this word called carbs. And then we put all of these things in that one filing cabinet called carbs. And so the question is, are there good and bad carbs? Of course. Are there good and bad meats? Of course. Are there good and bad? You know, it's just, that's how it is. So what I would suggest to you is that the carbs that are going to be the ones that are the best for you are the ones that are as nature originally intended them. Like, I'm talking about seasonal fruits, which means that it's a pack. It's not like coming in a package with a label with its ingredients. It's not been processed and manhandled and turned into some gelatin goop in the bottom of your bowl. Like,
yeah, we just lost your sound there for a second, Eric. Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I'm back. I don't know what happened there.
Carry on. We got you to the point of in the bowl, that the goop in the bottom.
Right. So yeah, like tofu, for example. So if it's a naturally occurring piece of fruit, as best we can get today, yes. But remember, the other thing with fruit was seasonal availability. And honey, same thing. I'll tell you what, the Hadza, they love honey. We've been eating honey for a long, long time, but not every day. So first of all, there are good and bad carbs. I would say that, you know, refined flour and all that, the grains and all that stuff, definitely sugar, refined sugar, all definitely bad carbs. Good carbs would be things like fruit and honey, but even those would be best to be very limited and seasonal and not on a regular basis. I hope that helps, Billy.
No, it's really good. In fact, that leads on to a next question very, very nicely. Marvelous says, what about, in the UK, we say an apple a day keeps the doctor away, which is a saying we have in the UK. Well, it's complete nonsense. It's just wrong. Maybe an apple a day, that 1 week it's on the trees is fine. But an apple a day, if it's an apple and that's the only sugar intake you got, maybe you're okay. Maybe you'll be fine. But if you're putting the apple on top of pasta, rice, baked potatoes, bread, then an absolute no-no.
Yeah, I would agree with you. First of all, nature would never have allowed you to have an apple a day. It just wouldn't have allowed that. You know, it was available and then it was gone. But I think that expression, it's a rare example where a healthy food has a good slogan. It's usually all the bad ones, like open happiness. You know, it's usually those guys who have the best slogans. But I think that the concept of the apple a day keeps the doctor away comes from a time when people had really messed up their vitamin C relationships. Now, humans get vitamin C really from two sources quite well. One is from seasonal fruits and that sort of stuff. And the other one is from organ meats. But somewhere along the line, we stopped eating organ meats regularly. It's not so common for people to eat organ meats. You've never gone to a restaurant, when was the last time you saw a restaurant that served liver or kidneys or heart or any of that kind of stuff? It's very uncommon. And so I think that the concept of the apple a day keeps the doctor away was really born at a time when vitamin C deficiency was really at a high, to the point that there was actually scurvy in the population. So at that level, yes, an apple a day keeps the doctor away. But no, today, an apple a day is just, one step on the path toward insulin, insulin production problems and insulin resistance issues and so on.
Yeah, and if you're one apple a day comes in the form of a carton and juice without any of the fiber goodness,
that's cocaine.
Then you're well on your way to many other disastrous health outcomes. Sean says, that's had that one already. Still not bread since somebody else said, still not had bread since this show started. How do you drink your coffee, please? How do you drink your coffee? Well, I'll tell you mine. I used to put butter in mine and coconut a couple of years ago when I couldn't access my own body fat when I went sort of zero carbs. But I don't need to do that anymore. So if you're a carb burning machine, then maybe put some fat into your coffee. If you're not a carb burning machine and you know to access your own body fat, then you don't need to do that. That answers that one. Hi Billy, Eric is not against carb. Oh, that's your team saying that you're not against carb on there. Fascinating talking to you. It's been a real, I've learned loads today, by the way, so thank you very, very much for that. One thing I will add to your thing about fasting, I think you kind of touched on it, but what people really need to understand is the body it's black and white. You're either metabolizing food, you're either breaking down food, or you're in repair mode. So that whole thing you talked about, cleansing the stomach and the intestines and everything's absolutely right. And the problem with the onslaught of snacking and eat little but often, you just never get into repair mode. And I try and do like a 3 or 4 day fast 3 or 4 times a year. I try and fast literally till I'm definitely a nomad, so 1 meal a day. But then I try and have a complete fast for 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 times a year, because I really want to get into that repair mode. So I hope that answered that question a bit more. Give us a final, tell you what, let's end with a plug for how people get in touch with you. Tell us a little bit more quickly about WildFit, and then we'll, because it must be about 7 o'clock in the morning now, we'll let you get off.
Best way to really get a hold of me is Instagram. I actually manage my own Instagram account. Everything else is, I'm supported on, but if you ask questions on Instagram and you get an answer, that's actually me. So it's at Eric Edmeades. People looking to find out more about WildFit, it's real simple, getwildfit.com. We're also, we've got a YouTube channel that they can go to. And we are about to launch a big 14-day challenge where we're going to, over the space of 14 days, really help people create a foundation of new food psychology. And so they can find out more about that from me on Instagram or at getwildfit.com.
It's absolutely brilliant. We've just been putting your URL up on screen so more people can watch it. Eric's been an absolute blast talking to you. I could go on and on. Maybe we can get you, my family and I have committed to do this show till the end of lockdown. Maybe if it goes on and on, maybe we can drag you back in maybe a couple of weeks.
Absolutely. Just reach out to the team. We'll make it happen. I'd love to support you.
That's great. Thank you very much, Eric. I hope everybody at home really found that fascinating. I certainly did. I learned a load today from Eric. Now, we were supposed to have a few more calls coming in from the Trussell Trust. We have. Okay, fantastic. We've got Kate on the line, and Kate is an operational manager in London and the South East for the Trussell Trust. How are you this morning, Kate? Sorry it took a while to get to you. Hello. Okay, we'll try and get Kate back. We've got a little technical issue there. Let's do a food fact, and then let's try and raise some money for the Trussell Trust. So today's food fact, I decided to go for ginger today. Now, a lot of people think about ginger in terms of supplements and powders and so on, but I like putting ginger in as many things as I possibly can, and ginger is almost like a medicine from nature. Back talk to Eric, it's the sort of thing that occasionally they would find out in bushes, in roots, and roots, of course, full of good fiber. So wherever you can, try and add ginger to your meals. And the other thing you can also do, and I adore this, I don't know if you've ever tried this, get a boiling cup of water, add some slices of lemon, some slices of ginger, and you're making effectively your own tea at home, but full of great nutrition. So that is today's food fact. Keep writing down all the food facts if you can, because at the end of lockdown, we're going to have a competition to see who can remember the most food facts, and there will be, like all competitions, some really good prizes. Jack, have we managed to get Kate back on the line?
Not quite yet.
Not
She's going to try it once more.
quite yet. She's going to give it another go. If you are new to the show, I hope you enjoyed that today. I thought that was absolutely fascinating with Eric. But if you are new to the show, we are, as well as trying to give getting some great guests on and giving health advice and tips on how to live more healthily, we're all about raising money for food banks across the UK, because right now more than ever, we've got a situation where more people are relying on the food banks simply because of the hard times we find ourselves in. Kate, give us an update from sort of the southwest and London.
Hi, thank you for having me on the show today. Great to talk to you. It's been a busy few weeks across London as food banks have risen to the challenge of providing emergency food to people in crisis. As I'm sure you would expect, the numbers of people needing the support of a food bank have risen at this time as more people have found themselves forced into financial difficulty. So the food banks have done an amazing job and have been extremely resilient, risen to that challenge, adapted and created new models, and are continuing to serve their community. So it's been an amazing response that we've seen.
Well done to all of you. And what can we all do to help?
Well, there are a couple of key things that you could do to help. The first is the food banks continue to be really reliant on the public donating food. So really practical items, those things that go into the 3-day emergency food parcel. So things like beans, fish, meat, all of the kind of standard items. I think you've got a list appearing on your screen now, but certainly meat, fish and milk, UHT milk, are key items. The best way for the public to know how to do that is to go onto the Trussell Trust website, type in your postcode and find your local food bank. On there, you should receive details about exactly where to drop off that food, which will then go to serve people in your local community. So that's one way that people can respond. And the second way is to donate. And we are so grateful to Primal Living for your fundraising campaign. And it's amazing to see that over £18,000 has been donated already. So encouraging people to donate to the Trussell Trust would be really helpful. And that supports us in a variety of ways. It helps us in really practical ways to respond and provide support and guidance and funding to our food banks at the moment, but also help them immediately after this crisis as well, to look at their longer term strategy and their longer term plans around how do they end the need for a food bank in their community. And similarly for us as well, it will help the Trussell Trust look at those structural reasons why we have a situation where where so many people are forced into poverty, and try and look for solutions to how do we actually end that? How do we work towards a situation where everyone has enough money to be able to provide food for their family? So that money will be hugely helpful, and thank you to everyone who has already donated.
Oh, that's really kind of you to say that. Thank you for telling us, the two key things there. Two key things. Let's put the right food into those collection boxes across the UK, in the supermarkets, and also at the same time, let's donate if we can via the Just Giving page or via the text. Thank you for coming on. I know you've got a really, really busy day ahead of you today. And from my family and all my friends and everybody at Primal, thank you for the work you're doing, because together we need to get through this crisis, and then together let's work with our organisation, the organisation, to try and make sure that people going hungry in our own countries are a thing of the past.
Absolutely. And yeah, thank you to you and to all of your viewers for all that you're doing to support the Trussell Trust. The food banks are doing an amazing job responding to the needs of their community, and that's only possible because of the support of people like yourselves and the general public who are helping to make that possible. So thank you.
You're more than welcome. Thank you very much for joining us, Kate. We will let you go on with a busy day, and we'll speak to you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to everybody watching and joining today. If you can, tell everybody about it. If you can subscribe, that will be absolutely fantastic. If you can give us the thumbs up down the bottom, that helps us get more people to come and see the show, and the more people we can make aware of this. And let's go back to what Eric said a little bit earlier on. He said, look, it's simple as that. If it wasn't for the food we eat today, maybe there would be no need for lockdown. Let's spread that message, because we know for a fact those that have got underlying conditions, which are mainly caused by the food choices we've been making, or maybe not the choices we've been making, the choices that have been forced on us through brainwashing and attacking our subconscious mind through marketing and all those lobbyists. If it wasn't for that, we might not be in lockdown at all. So, till tomorrow, please share the news, share the site, set the notification bell, tell everybody about the channel, and we'll see you again same time tomorrow. Join me at 10 o'clock every morning live on YouTube. Simply go to Primal Living's channel and you'll see our new Food Bank Show. Now, the Food Bank Show is basically what it says on the tin. We're trying to raise money for food banks across the UK that more than ever need our support. At the same time, in every show, I'll be joined by doctors and nutritionists that are going to help us reshape the food that we eat. Because maybe there's a bit of a silver lining for our health right now. All of the restaurants are shut. The McDonald's, the Subway, the Greggs, they're all closed. So we've got to change our eating habits anyway. But with the advice of some of the world's leading doctors, some of the world's leading nutritionists, I'm going to help you reshape the food that you're consuming and hopefully boost your immune system to get through this very difficult time.